Ancient Egypt was one of the earliest civilizations in the history of the world, dating all the way back to 3500 BCE. It was ruled by kings and queens called pharaohs, who the ancient Egyptians believed were representatives of the gods themselves. Perhaps it's not surprising then that religion and religious myths formed a very significant part of everyday life. The Egyptians' mythology, like their culture, was rich and diverse, and they worshipped hundreds of different gods and goddesses. Some of these deities we know more about than others. What stories we do know are some of the oldest myths that survive today, and they reveal a world of warring gods, miraculous magic, and the triumph of good over evil. Inside this book, you can read some of the many versions of these tales, but remember, there are still more out there. Ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians lived in the area in and around modern Egypt, in the north of Africa. Since more than 90% of Egypt is desert, the Egyptians mainly inhabited the land around the River Nile. Their civilization was ruled by a king or queen called a pharaoh, from around 3100 BCE until the last one died in 30 BCE. The pyramids were huge tombs built for pharaohs around 4,500 years ago. Many pharaohs were buried in tombs in the Valley of the Kings. There were people living in Egypt for thousands of years before it became one kingdom. Two lands. Ancient Egypt was divided into Lower Egypt in the north and Upper Egypt in the south. When they were united, the pharaoh wore a combined red and white crown to symbolize both. The Nile. Every year, the banks of the Nile would flood. This moved river soil onto the land, making it fertile for growing crops. The Egyptians depended mainly on riverboats to travel and trade goods. Religion. The ancient Egyptians worshipped numerous gods, who they thought lived with them on earth. The pharaohs were also considered gods, and both had temples dedicated to them. The beginning. Without the changing seasons, weather, and fertile soil brought by the flooding of the River Nile, the ancient Egyptian civilization could never have existed. The Egyptians thought these changes in the natural world were controlled by gods and goddesses. The first myths concern the creation of the earth and how the Egyptian deities governed everything from the rising of the sun to the number of days in the year. The creation. At first, nothing and everything existed all at once. In every direction, the universe was filled only with the never-ending ocean called Nun. There was no land or light, no people or plants, only black, swirling water. However, the potential for everything was hidden within Nun's depths. Silence reigned and nothing stirred for no one knows how long, until suddenly the tiniest of beings awoke. This was the god Atum, whose body slowly grew inside the ancient ocean. When he was finally ready, Atum separated himself from Nun. Atum emerged from Nun, sitting atop a gigantic pointed mound called the Benben. This was the first land, and it allowed Atum to stand up. In this way, Atum set in motion the beginning of all things. At first, Atum was content, amazed at his own existence. However, as he thought more and more, he also began to realize that he was lonely. His was the only mind that existed, apart from Nun's, and Nun was quiet and mysterious. With whom could he pass his days?